Julie actually asked me to do something that's very un-British and actually talk about myself a little bit to begin with. So last night after I had a few drinks, I went home and wrote a few notes, so we'll see how we go. So she asked how to describe what entrepreneurship actually means to me and how it's actually affected and played out my life. I think entrepreneurship, it starts with a vision. And what actually defines entrepreneurship is actually execution of that vision. Many people have great ideas, but few take the steps to bring them into life. A true entrepreneur actually takes that vision and does everything in their power to make that real. They solve problems, they navigate issues, obstacles, they work through regulations, whatever it takes to be able to do it. And of course, they actually push through doubt, their own doubt and other people's doubt, because you just got to keep on going. It's an impossible path. It's a relentless and persistent in terms of pursuit of your goal. And this is the thing with an entrepreneur, and certainly in my case, whether you succeed or whether you actually fail, when the next opportunity appears, you forget about all the pain and misery you've gone through on the last one, you just go again. And that's the type of, I feel, part of my life. And for most of us entrepreneurs, it isn't really a choice. It's something that you can't switch off. And certainly for me, my vision is actually really quite grand. It's about creating something that makes a difference that benefits everyone. And it goes back to reading a book by Richard Branson when I was 13, and I've taken that forward. And that's why I think I've fallen into cancer. And in terms of a bit of background about myself, I set up my first company at university, Mad Cow's clothing company. It started selling a few t-shirts to a few clubs, and then I started having a full range of fleeces, hoodies, clothes, 2 shops, all made in the UK, which then I sold before I left university, enabled me to put a deposit on my first house in London. Which then subsequently led me to do in terms of developing. I don't know actually how many houses I've actually done now, but I've got a portfolio of 10 properties of various sizes and shapes across the north of London. And then whilst I was at university as well, I also bid and won the right to be able to win university skiing for the UK. To give you an idea, we had the largest sales, it was 4 million, so it's not a small organisation run by 6 people, which we're completely out of control. I'm not quite sure how they allowed us to do it. And to give you an idea what the flagship event was running, a trip for 2,500 people in Lazark. I apologise if you're in Lazark for that week. And we basically brought Ibiza to the mountains. It was actually a great experience to be able to do that. And then having effectively actually run 2 businesses at university and having a really great time, I have to say. I managed to graduate, which is a surprise really to myself, and then I set off in Ernst & Young in their tax program. And I must say that was much harder than university. University, everybody says it's hard work. I found it really quite enjoyable and relatively easy. I managed to get through. But it did give me a foundation of world-class training. And then I left Ernst & Young, a well-paid job, doing particularly well, and I set up basically what is a supercharged money supermarket. It was in terms of being able to aggregate data independently and then actually connect it with IFAs. And I built up this business. I was the director. I didn't actually have a title because I was just a young guy and everybody else was the people that actually had the knowledge around me. And just as we're starting meaningful discussions with Viva, the dot-com bubble burst, and basically I didn't have any investment or funding. So I turned to my chairman, a gentleman called Trevor Sweet. He's the ex-managing director of Hill Samuels, who did lots of privatisations in the 80s, a big banker. And he had a turnaround business called Poston Executive Group. And at the age of 25, I went into turnarounds. Maybe at 40, you have the experience. But in terms of me going through that, it was a massive learning experience in the 4 years I've got there. He then introduced me to a gentleman called Robert Gaines Cooper, a billionaire serial entrepreneur. He had a company called the Laryngeal Mask Company, an innovative airway for anaesthesia, which has transformed the way that anaesthesia is done. And that's led into over 20 years of experience in medical device. It gave me end-to-end experience of actually how to be involved in a medical company. Part of that was trying to set up to do a trade sale, which turned into a 330 million listing in Singapore, which I managed for the company. We had 2 banks, DBS and Credit Suisse, 11 lawyers, because it's an offshore structure. In fact, Robert Gaines Cooper was the person that was done for non-doms in the UK, so the whole of UK non-dom law is actually based around him. But then I became the business development director, and my job was to be acquiring, finding innovative creators, innovators, and then building implementing them into the business and bolting them on. So I took a business, got it going, and then left it in the business and then went on to the next business. It gave me a really, really great knowledge of how to set up and run a business. It also, as part of the IPO, it gave me a great vision on what was going from private to public as well. It's not that I won't take combat public, but it'll be when I take combat public, because it really does take a lot of the dynamism and innovation out of a company, and they were a very innovative company before they went public. One of the businesses then I actually tried to acquire was owned by Alberto. Alberto is my business partner and co-founder of Combat Medical. So I then left a very well-paid job and went into business with Alberto. And 22 years later, I can say it's the best decision I ever made in my life. I'll describe Alberto as well before I jump into the presentation. Alberto is a pharmacist in background, so his clinical background and expertise is second to none. Most people think he's a professor and a doctor. But he's one of the most brilliant people to work with, and together we form a formidable team and a very well-balanced partnership. Between us, we've got up to 40 products we've estimated that we've bought and developed and bring to market, to give you an idea of the numbers that we've done. But we've got a lot, and now what I'm going to do is talk about actually Combat Medical, which is the standout company that we've been able to create. So what is Combat? Combat, we've developed a hyperthermic drug delivery system that significantly improves clinical outcomes. And when I mean significantly, I'm talking about a 50% fold compared with best in class. We've demonstrated this in phase 1, 2 and real world trials as well, so we've got good data behind that. We're already in use, we've got 2C approved products, we're selling, we're profitable. We've raised 18 million to date to get to the place of where we are, opposed to companies that have raised 1 billion. That's the type of benchmark where we are if you take J&J, which is our competitor. We're just closing off a Series A. We've already got 3 million in sterling. We're looking for another 1 million, but the round is good. We actually funded all the way through to pay for the FDA trial, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is critical. But we're really now moving on to the Series B. So we're going to focus on bladder cancer today, but there are other cancers that we will deal with as well. But there's been nothing that's been effective, affordable or tolerable, the most expensive cancer. Bladder cancer is one of the most recurrent cancers. So how does the actual system work? Well, it's delivered in an outpatient setting. We basically catheterize and then we deliver the chemotherapy into the bladder in a solution, and then we recirculate it. So it's delivered targeted to the organ. There's no systemic side effects, opposed to being given through the blood. And we have to be able to control the temperature, which we've been able to do. With our own company, we create 100% metal-based biocompatible heat exchanger. And we have to be able to control the pressure very precisely because of your weight during this procedure. If I say I'm going to double the pressure, that means, surprisingly, that means it doubles the incidence of number of patients not being able to complete the treatment. So it has to be tolerable, user-friendly. Like I said, we've done 125,000 treatments. We've done 20 patients also in the US as well. And it can be used with multiple drugs. It's a platform. So it's used with generic drugs. It can be used in combination. It can be used with the new checkpoint inhibitors. So it really is a very exciting prospect. In terms of why hyperthermia, what does it actually do? What's the importance? Well, cancer cells can't manage heat as well as healthy cells. They get stressed at 41 degrees, whereas good cells don't get stressed until 44 degrees. Basically, they don't have as big a vascular system, so when you apply heat, they can't dissipate it. And when you actually heat any cell, the natural killer cells then will actually target that heat stressed cell and build a lasting memory. So what we're doing is we're delivering the drug just to the organ, and then we're stressing the cancer cell, and we can deliver within 43 degrees plus or minus 0.1 degree, very accurate temperature delivery. And inside of that as well, it's a approved delivery system. We've shown in cell lines that you can actually get 10 times more drug improved, and actually with the clinical trial at Duke University, we treated 20 pigs using cold chemotherapy and 20 pigs using hot chemotherapy. We actually got 11 times more drug absorbed into the tissue, so we're actually more effective than it was done in the laboratory. And of course, heat improves the concentration as well. But none of this actually matters unless you actually have clinical efficacy. You can have a wonderful molecule, and you'll see down here we've got Keytruda. Keytruda is doing 30 billion in sales now in some of their products in the PD-L1s. But in bladder cancer, it's being absolutely useless. It hasn't worked at all. In fact, it could be a good partner because we could be the partner to be able to, the catalyst to make it work more effectively. But if you look at our results, in terms of treatments, we're showing an 92% complete response rate in Cologne Hospital in a series of 60 patients. By the way, for FDA approval, you need 100 patients, so 60 patients is a relevant number. And at 12 months, 70% complete response rate. If you take to the best approved FDA drug, which J&J have just got approved, they've got 82% at 3 months and only 46% at 16 months. And in terms of the efficacy, that shows over 50% improvement. And if you put this in terms of actually the patient, 7 out of patients, these are patients that are all going to have their bladders removed. That's the alternative treatment. So instead of having their bladder removed, we're going to save 7 patients from having their bladder removed in terms of the impact. And in terms of the actual approval level for the FDA, which is the trial that we have ongoing at the moment, it's only a 30% complete response rate at 3 months because the disease is so bad. So if you look at our rate, it's not a question of getting approval, it's actually a question of being able to become the market leader. So in terms of about credibility, we did 3.5 million sales last year, 80% margin, 700,000 sterling. We've done 125,000 procedures across 350 hospitals in Europe, mainly university hospitals. The device is CE approved, we're sold in 35 countries. We've got a lot of clinical data, and what we lack is phase 3 clinical data, and that's what we're going to talk about and what we're about now, and that's the pathway to our success. We've got actually an infinite runway, except for when we have to pay for expensive trials, and this is what we're raising the money for. And it's a platform technology. We've got 2 systems. Here you can see on the left for bladder system, and this is for peritoneal. System's made up of an electrical system that controls the fluid control, and then it's a consumable set, and I'll talk about that later in a minute. But what will actually give us our monetization, our valuation inflection, is an FDA trial. We've got an FDA trial and pathway that's been well trodden, and if we reach that point, then we'll get a massive valuation inflection point. And when I talk a massive valuation inflection point, CG Oncology, one of our would-be competitors that still hasn't got approved, listed in 2004 off the back of 66 patients. They still haven't got FDA approval today, and they listed for 1.8 billion. Their valuation today, without being approved, is 5.4 billion. So that's the type of market. Our first patients have been enrolled, 4 of them. We've got another 5 lined up. We've got 9 hospitals open. We're going to exceed the 25, and we'll be near 30 hospitals. And we've had due diligence. I've spoken about myself and Alberto. We've got a good operational team behind us, but actually more importantly, the key opinion leaders that actually support us, like the who's who of bladder cancer. If you look at all of them, and I chose them deliberately, and we could actually have an intimate board because all these guys want our treatment to happen, because compared with these new drugs that cost literally 800,000 for a year's worth of treatment, we can be affordable. And in terms of peritoneal treatment, Paul Sugar Baker actually invented the original procedure, and we've been working with him to create his vision actually of the future, which is the same as ours. And just to bottom up look at the market, if we just take what we call BCG unresponsive patients that are being told that they're going to have their bladder out. There are 10,000 of them every year in the US. It's 150,000 treatments, and we take a low ball price of $4,000 for our drug and the system. Bear in mind, J&J have just priced their product at $67,000 to give you an idea of the multiple. It's 600 million. So our numbers are really conservative in what we're doing, and the market is actually enormous. And bear in mind that this market is the smallest of the ones that we're going after. The business model is well established. We're already approved. We're used in Europe. A treatment costs just over 3,500 euros. In America, we'll be a drug, and we become a drug company. And I'll talk about that in a second. It's a razorblade model. We give the systems free of charge, so we don't have long sales time, so we make our money from the disposables. Already today, 90% of our revenue comes from a repeat business of this single use, and we sell through distributors apart from in the UK and Spain. Today, our blended margin is already 80%, and that's going to increase to over 90%. Our distributors make good money. And we've got a really robust manufacturing. Because of all the things in the world, I keep on thinking they can't actually possibly get worse, but we've got dual supply on either side of the world. So that enables us to make sure that we always have continuity of supply and components. In terms of IP, we've got 7 patents, 5 of them being granted. And the way that our IP works, we've got a core IP, which, for example, in the bladder, it's about controlling the temperature with the heat exchanger. But then we have a secondary IP that actually controls the accuracy, the algorithm, how we are able to do that. And then we've got third IP in the case of bladder cancer, actually a diagnostic system. So you put those all together, people are going to have to break through all of those to be able to come around it. And then after that, you have the know-how. To be able to get into our business, you have to run a clinical trial. A clinical trial in bladder cancer takes 5 to 6 years. So if you've got a new idea, you have to prove it to be able to run it, be able to get it in. And then obviously regulatory is a massive burden today. In terms of our platform, we've been able to expand the platform. We got a £3 million Innovate UK government grant. We've developed a catheter, which with working with Paul Sugarbaker, who I mentioned. It's a treatment where they just give a single treatment for HIVEC at the moment, which I was speaking to somebody last night, but now we're going to extend that with an implantable catheter you can leave in 6 months. Paul Sugarbaker proved in a phase 3 trial that you can improve overall survival by 19% in patients which are really at the end of their treatment life. And so all we have to do, but unfortunately when you actually go through that treatment, there's a 45% infection rates in the catheter. You're leaving 3 litres of chemotherapy in when he tried with an off-the-shelf cardio catheter. And what we've done is we create a catheter that can be used and kept in there without getting infections. And that's about to go into first in humans. And then there's also a colorectal we can talk about at another time. In terms of the FDA pathway, we've had 3 pre-R&D meetings with the FDA. That means minuted meetings about the approval. Now, what that makes this even more potent is that Jonathan Jarrow, an ex-professor of urology from Johns Hopkins, then went to the FDA and he left as the chief medical officer. He wrote the guidance for the single-arm trial that we're running. So he wrote the rule book, he's left, he's my key advisor, and he led all the conversations with the FDA, and he still is. I just spoke to him again this week. The FDA confirmed there were 505B, so in America, mitomycin, gemcitabine, all the drugs that are used with our system are approved, but they're not labelled or indicated for bladder cancer. So when we went to the FDA in 2016, they told me that we have to get the drug approved, and I thought I don't have the money to become a drug company. And then I met Jonathan, and he said, yes, you can do the single-arm trial, and you can run it in the UK, which is important. And it's enabled us to get into the UK. So in the UK, we're actually being paid for each patient that goes into the trial because we're selling the kit. The FDA confirmed it meets the protocol. We've also got King & Spalding, who are experts on reimbursement, to confirm we'll get a J-code. And we've got 2 predicates about that. In terms of the trial, we're running a £5 million trial, which is really a very, very cheap trial. It's clinically initiated from the hospital. So the hospital university is paying cost plus 20% on the trial costs. The NHS is picking up the tab in terms of the clinical treatment. We've got 4 patients I've talked to. And the first readout, and this is the thing you have to remember, is I'm very, very sure by the end of this year, I'll have 30 patients. 30 patients becomes something that I can monetize because they're companies that are ranging from $400 million to $11 billion in the US. They're on this pathway. And we'll be a type of, towards that. So a billion market cap, if we're a listed company in the US, wouldn't be unreasonable. In terms of the valuation pathway, well, you've got an FDA-approved trial. That's really critical. That trial is already funded, so I know that I don't need any money to be able to get to that readout. So I can get to that on my own in terms of doing that. The patient recruitment is on track, which is another important thing. So by the end of this year, I have those 30 patients. And then you'll have a valuation inflection. But on top of the valuation inflection with those 30 patients, I've got hospitals that are reporting on data. So we're going to have a meta-analysis from universities like Marseille, Erasmus, Cologne, Sheffield, massive university hospitals, and 2,000 patients that relate to this. So we'll be in a very strong position, which will help our sales growth in the meantime. And then if you look at us, we've got a 70% complete response rate, very low side effects, with 38 million today. CG Oncology with 46%, low side effects, 5.4. It goes on in terms of actually the treatment. So we have better efficacy, fewer side effects, easier to adopt, affordable. We'll be the only company in Europe because they can't get into Europe because they can't price it because of the Trump rules. They much prefer to sell at $67,000 and sell to a few patients than rather come into Europe where they would actually have to sell at most probably the pricing is about 30,000 euros for a patient they'll be able to achieve. In terms of where we are, we've raised 18 million to date. We're looking at the Series A. We're closing out regardless because we've got money now to the end of the year. So anything we're now is just topping up, which would be great, and we'll close at the end of April. We've already started socializing the Series B, which will be a 30 million round. And that will be done on or off the back of the data. So there's no guessing. We'll either have the data and it'll be good or we won't. So the valuation will be around there. And we've already started socializing that. So for example, a nice coincidence that came is that we presented in 2019, we didn't get VC money. Oh, that's one other important thing is that we've got no venture money. It's all private money, all family offices and individuals. So it's a cap table about 70 people, but it's well controlled and we're well integrated with the people. So, and in terms of actually the business and trade sales, we're speaking to J&J because they're a competitor, but if we're going to take them out on their drug delivery system as well, they're delivering an existing drug, and all they've done is actually deliver over a 3-week period, and they've got the best results. So all the new molecules have been beaten by a drug, and that drug, by the way, could be delivered through our system as well. It's the second most commonly used drug in Europe. Boston Scientific as well, possible listing, and Teleflex I know very well because that's what I sold. After listing the LMA, it was then sold to Teleflex as well, so I know the group CEO. He's actually stepping down, but I've spoken to them, and like I say, it's foundation money. So I'd like to leave it there and take any questions, and I'll just leave it on this slide, which just gives a type of timeline of where we're at and the progress in terms of what we're doing in the next stages. Thank you.